That's the general ethos that we've heard there, that kind of thesis that it is too difficult to try and figure out exactly what's going on, to try and predict with any stability, given that projections might dramatically change every 3 or 6 or 9 months.
Yeah, it's not uncommon to say that every 72 hours there is some significant update that challenges what's happened in the last 3 to 6 months. So it is just moving at an incredible pace, and it's very, very difficult just to stay up with it.
So is this a kind of a modern version of is it Moore's Law? Or Moore's Law is the one about the transistor power doubling every 18 months or 3 years. That it's now that on steroids, that we actually just can't project what this is going to be able to do.
So those laws are over, right? So the rate of pass of change, particularly across the knowledge articles, are completely over the top. Stanford released a report last year, and it showed the dexterity of human ability versus AI. And for the most part, AI was actually on a par. When that happens, organisation structures dramatically start to change and job descriptions start to change, because AI can actually replicate what humans can actually do. And that's going to start to trickle through to the workforce very, very quickly.
Emmet Ryan, do you genuinely think, or do you share the view that it will be relatively soon around the corner before AI will be able to replicate with the same sort of nuance that humans can do, or are we over fantasizing how much it's going to be able to do very quickly?
Well, the important word you said there, Gavin, is nuance there, because right now it can replicate very well so long as it's given the data, it's fed into it. It's very much rote learning. There was an Apple paper there a couple of weeks ago essentially saying that the current models that we see, like many of the ones that Mark works with, they're very, very good at taking on board information and regurgitating that to some degree. Often maybe more clearer than you or I might phrase it, but actually thinking through it, reasoning based on the information, is where things get very difficult for AI as we now know it. But that being said, the first time I was on this show talking about AI a couple of years ago, maybe less than 2 years ago, I was pointing out that the giveaways we had for AI images back then, like there'd be a sixth finger or a hand to be facing the wrong way, they were going to go away very quickly. They did. We will certainly reach a point where AI is at a stage where it can be more cognitive, so to speak, although I'm nervous even using that word, because it's still a long way away from that. I'm not trying to rain anybody's parade, because we still should be wary of it and we should act based on it, because this is one of the few times with a technological development where we have, in theory, ample time to adapt, to get the workforce ready for what impact it's going to have, even though we are unsure of that impact. But it's like I was saying to Mark in the green room before I came on, the old saying, it's like those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. Those who do are doomed to watch on helplessly. So, and that's kind of the one fear I have, is that even though we are being given all these huge warnings of we need to adapt, we need to be ready, we still may not as a society, particularly in Western democracies, adapt quickly enough.
Mark, before we hear from the politicians about how exactly we respond to this, in the abstract, you can think of this as being this tremendously exciting time, that we now have this incredible army of tools that might sort of take some of the mundanities out of our lives in ways that we could never have even imagined 12 months ago. And yet, a lot of those mundanities, for better or worse, are things that people make a living out of. And it's petrifying to think that so many of those jobs could be made redundant almost instantly. Yeah,
I always think about a quote from Ernest Hemingway when he talks about when he went broke, and they asked how it happened, and he said slowly and then suddenly, right? And what we're actually seeing is when people are actually leaving their jobs through natural attrition, that could be 25 to 30% of a workforce, more and more, they're not being replaced. So you've got an augmentation where AI is actually taking over and supporting the existing team. Now, if you compound it over 2 or 3 years, that actually starts to make an impact into the workforce. What we're seeing more and more is for graduates, very, very difficult to get a job, because AI is actually doing a large amount of what they would be actually doing, and that is a challenge.
An entry-level
lawyer, position, graduate lawyer, a software programmer. So it's becoming very, very difficult to do that. And then when you're actually looking to say, oh, do I hire another person? The first question is can we actually have AI to do that position? And can you justify in that job description that we can't do that? And employers aren't out there saying we want to remove people from the workforce, but they are under pressure to do more with less. Customer experience is very, very important. And the cost of actually hiring people is a detriment for a lot of businesses. So they have to actually reimagine what they do and how they do it. But if there isn't an upskilling plan put in place, particularly for graduates coming in, they're going to find it very, very challenging to get work, and that's going to become a real issue for our society.
Darren O'Rourke, you were at that Oireachtas AI committee meeting yesterday. You've heard that very sobering outlook just now. How do we prepare for this?
Yeah, it is a huge challenge for governments, for the European Union. It's a tremendous capacity in the technology, and it's changing very quickly. It's largely private-led, and there are huge incentives there, so it can be difficult for governments to try and catch up with it, never mind try and get ahead of it. I think there are, but we need to put that framework in place. It will need to be a responsive and reactive framework, and I think the EU AI Act is a step in the right direction. But I think I think the establishment of the AI committee itself was a positive move for me, and we're 2 meetings in. The architecture, the regulatory environment is very, very nascent, is very, very underdeveloped. Maybe that's understandable, but
in a way, is that a good thing? Because it means if you can then recommend, I don't know what the terms of reference for your committee are, but if you've got maybe 2 years to do your work, you could recommend a good regulatory regime.
But I think there's, we constantly hear about this balance between regulation and innovation and striking the right balance. And I think we need to have our eyes open in relation to it. Like there are, for example, there are significant concerns in terms of the potential impact. We've mentioned jobs, but maybe that's a piece that we can manage our way through. But the environmental impact, for example, the climate impact of a huge amount of energy that's used for this, the potential impact in terms of undermining democracy. So we do have to respond very quickly in relation to this to ensure that there is as much regulation of it and to ensure that there is protections there. And we know, for example, significant biases within all of these models that need to be very transparent.
Fiona, what is the government going to do about this in the short term? What is its approach? Is it to try and manipulate this? Is it for the government to become a world leader? Is it for Ireland to become Europe's playground on this? Is it a threat? Is it an opportunity? What is it?
It's both a threat and an opportunity, and I think that we have to look at ways that we can empower workers, not disarm them, not get rid of them. We need to look at new job opportunities that can be there. The ethics are really important, and we absolutely need to get that right. And the Council of Europe did put a convention in place. 17 EU countries so far, I believe, have signed up. And I think that's important. And that's really around the protecting democracy and human rights in relation to AI. But I think that there's many, many ways it can be used. For example, in the whole agricultural industry, for farmers who pretty much work on their own on an ongoing basis, I think AI can be very helpful in terms of crops, in terms of analysing soil, analysing moisture, being able to detect possible disease, etc.
More elaborate way of doing the mechanised stuff that they already do pretty extensively on farms.
Yeah,
anyway.
And I also think with businesses as well, because we constantly hear about businesses being trapped by red tape. So when government wants to help them, that the amount of red tape they have to go through to draw down money, draw down grants. And I know that Leo are rolling out 2 different schemes around supporting businesses with AI. And I understand businesses have developed twice. But I think that in terms of helping that red tape, AI can possibly be used very satisfactorily for that. So I think that we need to look at the ways that it can help businesses and support them, and of course businesses that we don't think of in the SMEs like farm and agriculture.
Mark Kelly, I don't want to gloss over the environmental impact of it, but one point that I've seen been made in the last couple of days is that the sheer volume of content that be created by different AI models, LLMs, all over the internet, that they're creating so much content now without there being any real assurance of quality, that it's effectively producing an enormous amount of digital slop. And one person used the phrase digital asbestos, that we're going to spend the next generations cleaning out crap which has been deposited all over the internet by some LLM that didn't know what it was talking about.
So you're going to have the content creation that you can create. You can create incredible things, credible videos, credible images, and there's so much opportunity to do that. But more and more, we need a watermark to actually decipher what's real and what's not. And this is going to become a real challenge, particularly when the world of kind of deep fakes. For me, the only defence that we have is literacy, because the EU AI Act and regulation that's there isn't fit for purpose, because it's clear as mud when it comes to actually businesses starting to use it. And no regulations are going to be able to actually keep up. So with literacy, people will be able to actually understand the rules of the road. We need to meet people where they're at, depending on their job. And I always give the example of my mum, 65-year-old, she's a tour guide. She uses ChatGPT to help her create her itinerary for her tours. She uses Canva as a brochure, and she's been able to use a tool like Lovable to create a website. She's not literally a PhD in AI, but she uses that to go to the next step. My brother, he's an electrician. He used speech to invoice. That usually takes 20 minutes to create a quote. Within 2 minutes, he sent the invoice and he's back to doing his job. Now, if we bring relevant use cases to the people across this country, they're going to be empowered, they're going to use it, and they're going to use it in the right way. But if we try to teach them in a way that all the mechanisms of how AI is, the PhD all around that, they're not necessarily going to learn. So for me, there's less slop if we teach them how to use it correctly and the right ways to use it.
Fair enough, and I'll take that point. But Emmet, I mean, I'll give you a little sense of my own insight on this. I would have thought 3 months ago, maybe the last time we were having an AI discussion on a programme like this, I would have thought that it could never take over a role like this, because there's text coming in from viewers, there's points that one person might make that I'd like to put to somebody else. But then I saw what Google has generated with its new, I can't even remember the name of the tool, but it's not available in the European Union yet, partly because of the concerns around AI, ironically enough. But it is a tool where I've seen it create a newsreader's prompt, where you want the newsreader to read a certain introduction to a storyline. The studio looks pristine, it looks very realistic. It's got a newsreader who speaks with exactly the same toner. They're not going to look down that camera and make a hames of the autocue like I did a couple of minutes ago. They're never going to get tired. They're never going to have bags under their eyes. They're never going to have an antihistamine attack. Why wouldn't some technologist use someone like that and put someone like me out of a job when they can do it?
Well, fundamentally, it comes down to the human relations that build around how we do the jobs we do, Gavin. That's not just media, that's in all jobs, because every major technological shift has eventually led to other roles for other people, for people who were moved out of them. The problem is that huge seismic impact in that we aren't really able to work out how we're going to move that. So the classic one is like TV upended radio, but the internet upended TV already, and radio upended print media as we know it beforehand, and the printing press upended the town crier.
Yeah.
So,
now when you go to Google, you get an AI-generated summary of the results that you think you want anyway.
But who's putting those that data in? How is that data being gathered? Who's working out like what the actual order is? And fundamentally, that's where the knowledge of how humans operate comes down to it, because it's very easy to get Google to summarize the news in very simple bite-sized chunks, but to be able to understand the meaning of it is very different, and that's why it comes down to they hope to have a Gav Riley, I suppose, to be entirely honest, or someone who they can actually trust rather than this monotonous robot. Like we're still a lot, even if it is presented like a human, there is still the uncanny valley factor to it. So I think we're a long way off that element being done. But like I was saying to you at the top of this segment, my real concern is that we as a society are not going to adapt quickly enough to be able to make sure that people can transition, especially those mid-career. So I am entirely self-serving here because I'm mid-career right now. That those of us who are mid-career can work out how we're going to adapt and find out what we're going to do next if our jobs are impacted.
Darren.
Yeah, and I just I sometimes I feel like, and I've made a couple of points at the committee. I think we need to think about the role of the state in relation to this.
Sure.
And we just signed up as associate members to CERN last week, and there was an argument for a CERN for AI, and I think it is somewhat different, the fact that it's so like all of the power in a small number of hands of egomaniac tech bros is there is a risk associated with that.
We're going to come to one of those tech bros in part 3.
But we I feel like we need a just transition piece here, a protection for workers, that they won't face a cliff edge just because there has been a development in the last 24 hours. So they need to be at the centre of this workers.
I'm really overdue an ad break. So in the final 10 seconds, Fiona, this idea that the committee heard yesterday of there need to be some sort of rolling log of the jobs that are lost, so that we realise the industrial impact before it's too late.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I just looked at a PwC report in relation to AI for 2024 and said that 87, in terms of AI, about 10% of those that would be impacted had reduced numbers, but 87% had stayed the same or who had taken on extra numbers. And absolutely, we do need to keep a rolling monitor on it. One
texter has been in touch to suggest that we should all just get trades because AI can't wire a house. But I did see an automated lawnmower last week, so I'm not sure about that. We will leave it there. Thank you to Fiona O'Loughlin, to Darren O'Rourke and to Mark Kelly.